What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you again, early morning this time. Yankees suck. Congratulations to the Dodgers, I guess, even though I can't stand that team either, but at least it's better than the Yankees winning. So the World Series is over, finally, with the Dodgers with a big time comeback in that game and win. Speaking of winning, I won 2-0 last night in the NBA, my first two NBA wins there, both of them with the win. Portland Trailblazers with the money line cash as well, hanging in that game. They wound up winning outright. I'll take that. And the Knicks won as well. So we're off and running, man. I mean, good night last night. I want to continue it. Tonight's card is, I think, kind of difficult, more difficult than last night's was, but I'm going to get into it. I'm going to try to do something with this card. NHL, kind of a short card. We have short cards in NHL, NBA, one NFL game and one college football game here. NHL, I mean, I'm looking at this. I'll just briefly point out, I do see a potentially a way to play this Montreal-Washington game, and I could see fading Washington in this spot and taking Montreal up, like maybe on the puck line, because they are such a big underdog. Washington down from minus 201 to minus 187. Very public. 80% of the tickets, 79% of the cash. So it looks like there is line movement coming in, reverse line movement against Washington. Washington, like I said, they look like they're kind of in a bad spot, a letdown spot. They're coming off beating the Rangers, man. And not only is that a big win over the Rangers, but it's even a little bit bigger because that's playoff revenge for last year. Washington got eliminated by the Rangers in the first round of the playoffs last year. So that's like double. That's like a doubly big win there for Washington. They could be in a letdown spot here. It is not a sandwich because they don't have anything up next that's huge. I mean, Columbus, who cares? But still, I think they could be in a big letdown spot off of that game. They're just staying at home, kind of basking in it, and it looks like they're probably going to be back to Lindgren in net here because they're alternating goalies. And if you look at what they've done with these goalies, Washington playing well, man. They're 6-2. They only have 2 losses, but both of those losses came with Lindgren in net. They're only 2-2 in his game, so I think he is going to be in net here, and they've done less well in his starts than in Thompson's starts. So I'll just point that out. Montreal, on the other hand, could be in a bit of a bounce back situation because they are coming off a really disgusting, ugly loss against Seattle. Now they're going out on the road, so not a bad situation for Montreal to just get out of there. If you get absolutely wrecked at home, embarrassingly, 8-2. Well, Montreal's been giving up a lot of goals, though. I mean, their goaltender situation is not straightened out, really. I don't even know who their goalie is going to be in net in this one. I don't know that it really necessarily matters as far as this play is concerned, but when you start a road trip, you tend to be in a more focused spot, especially if you're off of playing a real ugly game at home. So Montreal is in that spot. So I like the spot for Montreal in that one. I could see grabbing the plus 1.5 goals on that one on the puck line, and sprinkling some on the money line there. So that's how I look at that one. The play that I'm actually going to be on, and this is ugly, man. Both of my plays are ugly. Hard to do here, but this is going to be on my Boston Bruins money line, plus 145. That's where I'm going with this. Carolina's up from minus 157 to minus 163, even though Boston looks public. 80% of the tickets and 84% of the cash on Boston. Don't really see how Boston is that public because they've been playing so badly recently, and Carolina's been hot. So I am fading like the recency here just because I think there's recency bias here. I'm just surprised that the public is on Boston. So I think the recency bias has gotten a little bit too far. I mean, I'm not saying Carolina's not the better team. I think they are, but this line a little bit high. I mean, hockey, you don't get that much for home ice, and that line is quite high on Carolina. And if you look at the spot that Carolina is in, that's why I'm fading them here. I mean, Carolina, they're 6-2. Bruins are 4-5. So again, I don't see how the public is coming in on the Boston side here. Seems a little bit weird to me. Carolina's returning home from a road trip. Granted, they have had 2 days off, but I'm not sure that having that extra day off in there is going to help in this case. And this is a long road trip, 6 games. And I think having that extra day off could actually stall out their momentum because they won the last 4 games on that road trip. They went 5-1 with that only loss to St. Louis, which guess what? I had St. Louis in that game. Not to brag or anything, but my hockey has been pretty decent, even though I lost my last game. I think I'm like 8-4 or something, so I'll take that any day. So Carolina, I've been able to kind of identify spots to play against Carolina so far, at least that one, which was basically the only spot to play against them so far. But they're coming home from a road trip, man. So that tends to be a distracted spot. You have home life to get back to. I know you're facing the Boston Bruins, who are not the worst team out there, but they have Washington up next, man. Could this actually be a look ahead to Washington, even though they have multiple days off in between the two? And Washington's been playing a lot better than Boston has, so it's possible they actually are slightly looking ahead to Washington in this case, even though Boston normally would be a big game. The way Boston's been playing, maybe not. So I do think this sets up to be a potentially distracted spot for Carolina, and with the extra day off in there, that could kind of hurt their momentum a little bit. When you've been winning, you don't want to have multiple days off here, really. You want to keep playing and play through. It looks like Anderson will probably be in net for them, as they've kind of been alternating as well. It doesn't really matter for them. I don't think both of their goalies are actually good between him and Kochetkov. They have two good goalies, so I don't think that's going to matter at all. But again, it's a return home spot from a long road trip. They haven't been home for like over a week, so that is the type of spot that I look for. I think a team's going to be a bit distracted, so I think that's going to be the case for Carolina, whereas Boston, I think they're in a spot to bounce back here, man. I mean, they're below 500, which I think is the first time since they were 0-1, and they did win to bounce back from that. But again, it was against Montreal at home. But they also bounced back after a loss to Dallas. They won to get back to 500 again. So both times they've fallen below 500, they bounced back. So that's not a bad spot. The Bruins, they're starting a road trip here, so that's also a positive. And they're coming off an ugly loss, man. They lost to a Philadelphia team that I think hadn't won since their first game of the season. Philadelphia, bad goaltending on Philadelphia. Boston got shut out by that pretty awful goaltending tandem in Philadelphia. I don't even know which goalie was in net for Philadelphia. Doesn't really matter, man. When you're coming off a bad loss like that, just like I said with Seattle, at home, it's a good thing to just get out of there, go on the road, focus on hockey, even though I know they have revenge up next against Philadelphia. But you think the Bruins are going to overlook the Carolina Hurricanes to start the road trip off of a ridiculously ugly loss? I doubt it. I think they're going to bring their game, man. I think they're going to be focused here. And keep in mind that game against Philadelphia was with Korpisalo in net, who the Bruins are 1-2 with him in net. So Swayman should be back in net for this one, even though he had a stretch where he wasn't doing that well either. But still, the Bruins' offense has really been the issue, not really Swayman, even though I think they're overpaying the guy. But this offense needs to get back to it, man. Korpisalo wasn't even that bad in that last game, really. It was the Bruins' offense just has to get going. And maybe the Bruins, they were coming off an overtime game, big win over Toronto, really, in an original 6 matchup. Maybe they look past Philadelphia because Philadelphia's been playing so poorly, and they had Carolina up next, which is a much bigger game. So it's a situation, though, where you have a team starting a road trip, which is a focus spot, against a team returning home from a long road trip, which is an unfocused spot. So give me the Bruins money line, plus 145. That's going to be that play. Looking at the NBA, there isn't a whole lot going on with the NBA here. Let me see. I thought I had it up, but I switched to the NHL here. NBA, there are only 4 games here. The game that kind of caught my interest the most was Rockets-Mavs, because the Mavs are coming off a pretty big win over Minnesota in that rematch of the conference finals last year, even though Minnesota was gunning for revenge there. The Mavs played a tough game there and won. So with the Mavs doing that and having to return from Minnesota, doesn't look like the best spot to me for the Mavs here. And they do have Orlando up next, who's like an up-and-coming team. So I don't know if they're going to be looking ahead really to an Orlando team who's in the other conference, but maybe they will. And Dallas, I think, has pretty much kind of had Houston's number recently. They're playing Houston tonight. Houston is like kind of their little brother, one of their little brothers. Both of the other teams are kind of little brothers right now in the state of Texas. As Dallas has been easily the best of those 3 teams. So I think that puts a little bit more motivation on the other team when those teams face them. You know, Dallas did beat San Antonio. San Antonio's not off to a good start. Houston almost made the playoffs last year and isn't that bad a team. And you can maybe see them start rising up a little bit. So I think this is not the greatest spot for Dallas. It's also a 3rd game in 4 days where they played at home, had to go up to Minnesota. Now they're coming back home. They did have yesterday off, but Not the greatest spot, I think, but mostly just because it's kind of a letdown spot there off of that big win over Minnesota. Houston just got revenge kind of over San Antonio after not playing well the first time against San Antonio and losing. And now they've had an extra day off in there. They've had 2 days off coming off beating San Antonio, which should kind of like help resume their momentum. So I think they're going to be focused here. I like Houston in the spot. Playing Dallas, it's a step-up game for Houston. They finally won. They beat San Antonio, and they didn't beat them by that much and kind of escaped. So maybe they were even looking ahead a little bit to this. My only hesitation is that Houston has really faced a weak schedule so far, losing to Charlotte and San Antonio and only beating Memphis and San Antonio. That's not the greatest, but I don't think Houston's that bad a team. Mavericks are down from 7.5 to 6.5. 7 is kind of a key number in basketball just because it's that like 3-score threshold where teams stop intentionally fouling. But I don't mind the Houston side plus 6.5 either. I'm not doing it, but that is the strongest lean in the NBA in my opinion. And Mavs, I don't really see any of the percentages on this yet, but it does look like this is reverse line movement against what I expect to be a public Mavericks side in this one. And then the Spurs, by the way, I think are on a back-to-back, having played at Oklahoma City, played decently tough at Oklahoma City, kind of, I guess, as a big underdog. And they have to go into high elevation into Utah. So it looks like not a great spot for the Spurs either. I'll just point that out on a back-to-back. And they're public because the Jazz, I think, haven't even won a game yet. 75% of the tickets, but 98% of the cash on the Spurs. I don't know if that cash is going to turn around, but it doesn't look like a great spot for the Spurs either. And the Jazz really need a win, man. Looking for their first win of the season, and this is a winnable game for them, so I expect them to show up. When you're winless, you're going to show up against even the worst teams, so I'll point that out as well. And then what else we got here? College football I'll go to, and then I'll finish with NHL. There's one college football game over in the American Athletic, I believe is what this is. Tulane at Charlotte. Tulane, one of my winners from Saturday. There we go. They're playing a midweek game now on a short rest. I think both of these teams are on short rest here, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just make sure of that, though. I think both of these teams played on Saturday, and now they have to turn around and play right away on Thursday. So both of these teams coming off difficult games, man. Charlotte coming off a game against Memphis, where they played pretty close on the road at Memphis. I'm assuming it's a big underdog. 16.5. So Charlotte's coming off a pretty big game there where they played tough against Memphis and barely lost. So I don't know if Charlotte's going to have that much left in the tank, man. When you're doing that, even though they are coming back home here, Tulane's having to go out on the road on a short week. Charlotte returning home off of a big effort, big game against Memphis there. So Charlotte could potentially be a little bit tired by the end of this one. And Tulane, they're a team that can really put up a lot of offensive statistics against you. So this Tulane team hasn't really let up offensively. They're coming off a big win as well, though, over North Texas, which was the game that I played, where Tulane was winning by more than that, and then North Texas scored a garbage touchdown right near the end. I'm like, don't go for 2. Please do not go for 2. And they did not. They just kicked the extra points. Yes, it stays at 8 there. Get the 7.5, baby. Minus 7.5 for Tulane, which should have been an easier win, I think, than it was. But Tulane puts up a lot of offense. Charlotte puts up a lot of offense, too, on a short week, which could affect the defenses a little bit in a game like this. I would look to the over more than the side in this one. Tulane's down from 16.5 to 15.5. 64% of tickets, 74% of the cash. So the line has dropped on them, but there is a little bit more cash on them. I mean, I might have a slight lean to Tulane there, but Charlotte is not that bad. I mean, they've had a pretty difficult schedule so far. So even though they're below 500, I mean, maybe they'll have a little bit more motivation just because they're still fighting for bowl eligibility. Tulane's one of the top teams in the conference coming into their house on a short week on a primetime game. So maybe Charlotte will get up for the game for that reason, even though they are coming off that big game against Memphis. Tulane, I mean, like I said, they're coming off a big game as well. High-flying game against North Texas. I know both of these teams do score a lot, so the over almost looks too obvious. It's down from 56.5 to 56, 94% of the tickets, 99% of the cash. So the public is going to come in on the over in this one as well, seeing especially what Tulane has done score-wise recently. But you're not going to find me trying to fade an over in this one. I mean, that is the way that I would look if I played this game. I'm not going to do it, but these teams can score, and they're a little bit weaker defensively than offensively. And Charlotte, like I said, they've played some pretty tough games actually mixed in there. I know they played Indiana, JMU, not easy teams to face. Navy, although they got blown out in that game. Blown out in a couple of those games. They faced North Carolina. Their defense sucks, though. And Gardner Webb, who somebody pointed out is not even that bad of an FCS team. So not a really easy schedule for Charlotte. I think it's actually been a little bit more difficult than Tulane's. And then NFL, to finish off the video here, I'm playing this game. Somebody please help me because I'm 0-3 playing the Jets. I mean, they've had opportunities to win most of those games. Not the San Francisco game in week 1, but the other 2 games that I played them, they had opportunities to win those games, man. The London game against Minnesota, and then I don't remember what other game I had them in, but we got to do it. We got to play the Jets here, -1.5. It looks like it's at 2 in most spots now, up from 1.5 to 2. And the Texans are very public, 71% of tickets, 72% of the cash. This is one of those ones where the public is not going to want anything to do with the Jets the way they've been playing. And look at the record disparity here: 6-2 for Houston and 2-6 for the Jets. Yet the Jets are favored. I mean, they are at home, but the odds makers are telling you that there isn't that much of a difference power ratings-wise between these two teams. Houston only slightly better if the Jets are getting a 2-point spread at home here. So the public's going to look at this and think, I mean, this is a really suspect line. Like, how are you getting points with a 6-2 Houston team here? Well, let's talk about it. I mean, first of all, I think the Jets are not as bad as they look. I mean, they had opportunities to win pretty much every one of these games. Oh, yeah, the Buffalo game was the other one I lost on. I mean, look at these losses for the Jets that they've had recently. The only game where they lost by margin was Pittsburgh, and even that game, they kind of just threw it away with turnovers. They were winning that game 15-6 and about to extend the lead even further right before halftime, and then just completely unraveled. And then in the other games, they lost right near the end against New England, Buffalo, Minnesota. Jets had a drive going near the end, lost that game. They could have won with a late score there if they didn't turn it over. Denver, they obviously could have won. I think they missed a field goal on that one, which, by the way, Greg the Leg, I think he's injured or something because he is not going to be playing. They picked up a new kicker. I forget who he is, but they picked up a kicker off the scrap heaps. I don't know if their kicking is going to be bad in this game or what. I mean, it concerns me slightly, but I mean, I think they'll still be okay. I mean, they at least do have a kicker, and they're not just going with no kicker whatsoever. But the Jets, they got to win a game, man. I mean, it's getting late in the season. They have to do something, and they're coming off their most embarrassing loss maybe that they've had in program history. I mean, I don't know. They were a 7-point road favorite there and couldn't even beat New England. And not only that, but it was a historic loss because the Jets had no turnovers. They scored at least 20 points, and they held New England to less than 250 yards of offense. And teams that have put up those stats have gone 756-0 in NFL history since like 1940, or they had gone 756-0. Now it's 756-1. So teams that do statistically what the Jets did in that game against New England had won every single game in a giant sample size, had never lost the game, and they lost the game. And not only did they lose it, but Drake May got hurt in that game, and they lost to Jacoby Brissett. I mean, really. But now the Jets are back at home, man. It's a short week. I think it's a bad spot for Houston. I think it's a good spot for the Jets to bounce back. I mean, if anything's going to really anger you and motivate you, it's got to be that loss to New England, man. I mean, enough is enough, right? And these other games were all like Minnesota, Buffalo, Pitt. Those are all like primetime games. So games that were really like in the spotlight. This New England game was kind of hidden in an afternoon. So they're finally getting away from the primetime slate for that game, and now they're getting back to the primetime slate again. But I think in this case, it actually helps the Jets. I think they're in a bounce-back spot there. I don't think the Jets are as bad as they look. I mean, their passing offense has gotten better the last couple of weeks. They have Devontae Adams there now. He already has rapport with Aaron Rodgers from being with him on Green Bay. Jets, they do have some injuries on defense, so this defense is maybe not as menacing as it has been like the last year or so, but it's still a good defense, and the Jets' offense, I don't think is anywhere near as bad as what it's looked. I mean, they have a lot of talent on that offense. It just has not come together yet. Houston, on the other hand, I think they're in a sandwich spot, dude. I mean, look at these games. They're coming off a big game over Green Bay. Or they went on the road, had to play a tough game against Jordan Love. Jordan Love against C.J. Stroud. big game between two guys who were like rookie quarterbacks, had their rookie season last year, basically. Then Houston swept the season series with Indy with a big win over Indy. Divisional win, but remember, that was against Anthony Richardson. Richardson not playing very well. I'll just put it that way. So if Joe Flacco was in there, it might have been a more difficult task for Houston there, but that's still a big win, divisional win. And up after this game, they got Detroit and then Dallas. I mean, Dallas hasn't been playing that well, but Detroit is a huge game. Detroit might be the best team in the NFL the way they're playing right now. So this could be a sandwich spot, man, between a huge divisional rivalry win and Detroit up next, and they're playing a massively struggling Jets team on the road here. It doesn't look that great. Houston also on the road is only 2-2, and they beat Indy and New England and lost to Green Bay and Minnesota. And the Jets, how good are the Jets? I mean, they're probably better than Indy and New England. They're definitely better than New England, and not as good as Minnesota and Green Bay. So right in the middle there. But Houston, their only losses this year have come on the road. CJ Stroud is not as good on the road, and he had his worst game of his career in this stadium last year. The Jets completely held him down. I think he did get injured in the game, but he played almost the entire game, and I think he had fewer than 100 yards passing. He was below 50% completion percentage, had no touchdowns. I don't think he threw an interception either, but that Jets defense really completely held him down. Granted, it was bad weather. It was in December. It was cold. This game is not going to be that way. This game is actually going to be like 70 degrees somehow up in New York in October on Halloween. Somehow it's going to be a bit warm. I think it's going to be a little bit warm up here too. So the weather is actually going to be fine in this game, which will help Houston a little bit. But still, Houston, I still think it's a bad spot, man. I mean, Stroud is still better in domes than outside. I mean, how many games has he even played outside? He's only played one game outside two, this entire season. But he did do it recently against New England and Green Bay, and he went 1-1 in those two games. So he is worse away from home and outside. He plays better in the dome. Not really a secret as far as Stroud is concerned. He's missing weapons now, man. This Houston offense is battered. Stephon Diggs is now out for the season. Nico Collins is still not back. So they do have some other weapons there, but still. And Dameon Pierce is out too, I think. So some backfield depth there is missing as well for Houston. So Stroud, not surrounded by his usual cast of really talented players there. They're missing some of those guys. I know the Jets are missing some guys on defense as well, but still, Houston, they're pretty banged up right now, and they're on a short week having to go on the road, man, to an environment they don't usually play in. That's usually difficult, the quick turnaround time, especially if you're off a big divisional win and you have a big game up next to. Having to turn around on a short week and go to a place that you're not used to playing, even though they did play there last year. That's a tough task, man. I said it with Minnesota last week, similar to that Minnesota Rams game. The home team tends to have the edge in a game like this, and they have less travel as well. Houston having to come up from Texas, whereas the Jets are just coming back from New England, so a much quicker trip for the Jets as well. And obviously playing in a stadium they know well because it's their home stadium. So we're going with the Jets in that one. And that's going to do it, man. The two plays today, Boston Bruins plus 145, Jets minus 1.5. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Follow the Tower Gang podcast, of course, patreon.com/Tower Gang. Throw us some support. We recapped Bro Grove in the episode last night. Fun episode. Not as fun as the live episode that we did last week, but go check all of it out, man. And have a good one. Happy Halloween. Hopefully these bets are not that scary, and hopefully we win. Peace.